I would like to introduce myself. My name is Usara Sapok. I am a Cambodian refugee. I experienced the Khmer regime, Khmer genocide from 1975 to 1979. I lived in a Thailand refugee camp for 5 years before being settled in the United States in 1986. I am also a Cambodian mental health worker and have been providing mental health services to the Bronx Southeast Asian community over 20 years. Like many other community members, I am a survivor and here today to share our story. Thank you so much everyone that coming today to the temple to get to understand of my community. First, I would like to introduce the Buddhist monk of the temple, Venerable Kandal Paut, who will briefly talk about Buddhism and the importance of the temple. Dekun, please, one.
It's okay, you can sit wherever you can. Just spend some time to listen to me. Thank you very much for you all here, especially Dr. Anderson and Musara, Joy. I am lucky to see you all here yearly.
And Dr. Okano over there.
Yes, sir.
You're too tall, can I see you?
And about this temple, we live in this temple 2 months. Me and another monk, but he's not here. He's busy with his school, so I'm here alone with you. On behalf of the board and the members, I would like to welcome all of you here and would like to say that we are very happy to see you all here. You all doctors. I am the patient of yours. Like Dr. Anderson said about Cambodian people and Musara said already, we have been through a lot of struggles in Cambodia, in the camps, and also here. We are a small community, but we suffer so much because of politics and economics. Whatever happened in Cambodia also affects our lives here. We live here basically physically, but we live in Cambodia mentally. We talk in our language and we do everything most of the time with our language, our culture. Dr. Anderson came to me and asked me how I am. I said that I'm okay, I'm fine. He knew that this going on in my life and my community. Like Dr. Anderson, he understood a lot. He worked for Cambodian people for many years. He also my doctor, Dr. Anderson. This was my doctor. He's very friendly to me, talk to me very nicely. Because we have been suffer a lot, and the temple is so important for Cambodian people. The temple is the center for the peace. The temple is the place to welcome all people, politicians, business people, and whoever, basically Cambodian people. So the temple is playing a role to unite people because Cambodian people suffer a lot and they are divided deeply in society, so the temple is playing to unite people. We keep our activities in the temples and outside. We keep our memories, that we work together, the pictures, and whatever we can. And all of this for giving the hope for people by spreading our culture and Buddhism. And Buddhism and our culture is the source of Cambodian people. When they come here, they are happy together, they work together, and they make friends. They also keep the friendship. Buddhism here also spread the peace in terms of people are angry, people are greedy, people are ignorant. So we give wisdom of Buddhism to the people, and people understand, they come together, they can be friends again, and make friends more and more. Dr. Anderson asked me also to lead meditation, so we will do that about 5 minutes after eating. You can experience about meditation. I think that meditation is spread a lot throughout the United States. We have many communities, Cambodian community, Sri Lankan community, Chinese community, Vietnamese community, all basically spread the peace through meditation, the peace in ourselves and the peace for others. So thank you very much to talk about 5 minutes, and later on we go to meditation. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much again. So I told the president of the temple not here, so I would like to introduce the gentleman Okasain. He always serves the Cambodian temple every week. This is him.
ខ្ញុំក្នុងនាមជាអាចារ្យវត្តនៅប្រចាំវត្តជូតនារាមនេះសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណដល់លោកដុកទ័រទាំងអស់គ្នាបានអញ្ជើញមកពិសាពូជនីអាហារនៅកន្លែងនេះសូមបានសុខសប្បាយទាំងអស់គ្នានេះ
Oh, on behalf of the temple, thank you for coming and joining us today. And you didn't tell me I was going to translate. This is my daughter, right?
My daughter.
And I can't say no, obviously. So on behalf of the members who cooked today as well, so I wanted to acknowledge them as well. Something Ben who's here, Hey Chun who's here. I don't know her name, I only know by...
Diana.
Where's Diana? Where is she? She's also at one point... No, she's born here, actually. Diana's born here. And then the president's wife is here joining us as well. So, who made all the food for y'all today? So, I just wanted to acknowledge them as well.
Actually, I don't know her name, but her name is Long Kim Huyen. I see the best cook
nicknames in our community.
for the food for the Cambodians. She's a good cook, but I don't know you like her food or not, but I do love it. Thank you, Bong. Good time.
No matter how much time passes and how many presentations or talks that we have here, I always get very nervous, so forgive me. And but thank you so much for coming and joining us, and we'd like this to be more of a conversation and not so much a presentation. So at any point during our talk, please feel free to ask questions or have any feelings or comments that come up. I'm a social worker by training. I've been working with Sara for, if you want to be exact, 28 years, providing outpatient mental health services. We just moved 2 years ago to One Fordham Plaza. We were one of the first community-based medical Montefiore clinics on 193rd Street between Marion and Decatur. And just to tell you a little background history about myself briefly, I am not Cambodian, even though I was telling the monk, in my heart I'm Cambodian, honorary Cambodian. I'm actually Chinese and Puerto Rican, and I grew up in Washington Heights. And after doing my studies in social work, I was looking for a job. And grew up in Washington Heights, as I said, and never really ventured to the Bronx. And a professor said to me, oh, you know, there's this position at Montefiore providing mental health services to Cambodian and Vietnamese. Would you like to interview? And I said, well, I didn't know where Cambodia was on the map. Vietnam, honestly, I knew very little about the history. And I said, okay, I'll try. And then I came to the Bronx, interviewed, and I said, okay, I'll take the job for a year. And here I am 28 years later. So what has sustained me for such a long period of time and providing services to maybe like yourselves, I don't know, does anybody here, knew there a Cambodian community here in the Bronx or Vietnamese community? Some, okay. But maybe like yourselves, coming to a community that you have not worked with, a group of people that have survived mass violence and trauma, torture, and what do? How do you provide mental health services or medical care to a group of people that may not have an understanding or a reference of Western medical care? As Dr. Anderson said, when the community was first resettled in the Bronx, the Family Health Center was really ill-equipped to deal with the medical problems and the mental health problems that the community members were facing. And the community had been resettled here in the Bronx. And so Montefiore started a collaboration with the Department of Psychiatry at Montefiore to develop a mental health program that would deal with the identification and treatment of survivors of mass violence and trauma. And we started modeling our program after the Harvard program in refugee trauma in Boston, who are pioneers. We don't take credit for none of the work that we do. They're pioneers in the field of the identification and treatment of survivors of trauma and torture. So Sarah and I, in the early years, we were in our office, and how do you engage a community? Again, I'm not Cambodian. I had no knowledge. And so Sarah's role at the beginning, at the early stages, as a community member herself, she comes from generations deep of family members in service. Her father was a monk here at the temple, so Sarah was instrumental. And honestly, none of the work that we do, from the mental health services that we've started to the progression of community organizing with us and led and continuing with Chaya, would not be possible without her role. So I always give props to Usara, and it just speaks to the importance of health promotion by community members. Okay, so at the beginning of our work, we had a motto. We started, eat, work, and play in the community. And it's very difficult to engage, again, community members if they don't know you. They're suspect of you. They don't trust you. And so it's something that's been very difficult to do throughout the years, but it's what has sustained us, is building a relationship with the community. And that's meant, as we said, eat, work, and play, working, eating with the community, coming to the community, for weddings, funerals, engagements. I mean, there's just so many community activities that we have partaken in throughout the years that has helped us, again, develop that relationship with the community. Now, with mental health services, you can also, maybe you have heard too, oh, Asians somatize. Or you can't do psychotherapy with Asians. That's a lie. Okay. Okay. It's a stereotype, and basically it's saying Asians somatize. Asians are stupid. You know, they can't talk about their feelings, and it's really untrue. I mean, just from our experience in the last 28 years and the findings and the research that has been done by the Harvard program in refugee trauma, you know, speaks to how psychologically minded Southeast Asians can be and are. And again, it's just the engagement of the the community that it took a long time, and again, integrating the mental health services in a community health setting. Now, as traditionally mental health services have been at the hospital, right? You have Department of Psychiatry, and patients are expected to go to the hospital to get mental health services, and this is something that there might be a push now. There's just a national trend, actually, to integrate mental health services in the clinics. And I assume you're all working in the clinics. There's a big push, but this is something that we had started working very holistically, actually, building community through arts and culture, and community organizing in the late 90s, in providing mental health services with the collaboration of a multidisciplinary team, a psychiatrist, the primary care doctors. So okay, so there's so many things to talk about, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, but one of the things that for me was a highlight throughout, with the beginning of the 6 years when we started providing mental health services, after 6 years, we saw that the community was not progressing socially, economically, and why was that? It was because there was a lack of investment of the U.S. government and other institutions in the building of the community. And because of politics at Montefiore at the time, when they first started, and this is not to badmouth, this is just history. So I'm just recounting history, just to make that clear too. There was family health workers at the clinic that would actually provide translation. And many of you have probably started using your language line. Now, how did that language line get there? Is it because of benevolence of the hospital that they want people to utilize to make sure they get heard? Actually, it was because the community, their positions of family health workers that were providing direct translation, they were in the clinic. They had got rid of their lines, and that's when Sarah and I started collaborating. If you ever heard of the Committee Against Anti-Asian Violence, organizing Asian communities, we started building with them through their youth leadership, Southeast Asian Youth Leadership Project, on community organizing around language access, education, welfare rights, and so the community members, which Chaya has also started as a young person, doing community organizing with them. Sorry, my mind lapsed for a minute. Started community organizing and protesting against the hospital. So that's why we have the language line, and you're supposed to use it to make sure that community members have access, whether it's Khmer, Vietnamese, Spanish, French, any African language. So I'm going to pass the mic to Chaya to start. And it's a little, we went back and forth with Dr. Anderson and Dr. O'Connell. We had some scheduling changes. We were initially supposed to go to MACOM, the organization that Chaya is the executive director, to check out a community-based organization. But the one thing that we have always, the way we operate is like a very much like a family affair. So our services, we try not to fragment them, and we really respect one another and understand our roles. And so we work together. As you see, everybody's here community building and working with one another. So we didn't want to separate it, and wanted to come together to speak to you, because each one of us has contributed in our own way. In terms of clinical services, if you have questions regarding, the type of treatment, what are the diagnoses, you can ask, as we move along. I'm just going to pass the mic now.
Okay. Thank you. No one has questions for Joyce?
Not
No,
yet.
not yet. Not yet. So my name is Chaya Chow, and obviously everyone knows. I'm Sarah's daughter. Like many things, she's birthed many things in this community, including me. So I was born in this is the running joke in the family. I was actually born in 1979. So this is when Vietnam occupied Cambodia and liberated Cambodia. But in actuality, I was born in 1978. I mean, on paper, I was born in 1979. I'm 78. But I was actually born, see, I'm still confused. And at my 30th birthday was when my dad, who doesn't really talk much, decided to make this huge announcement. It was a surprise party, my family and friends was there. And he's like, oh, I just want you to know that you're actually not 30. You're actually 29. You'll be 30 next year. It's one of those interesting things that, as part of me learning about what the history is like. And so those little things are joyful moments, right? But there's also many, many, I think folks have alluded to it earlier, just the immense suffering too that people experience. And, I work at the intersection of healing and organizing in Mekong. We started 5 years ago. We did a survey with the Urban Justice Center and NYU Center for Studies of Asian American Health, and found out that the conditions 30 years ago when we landed remained the same for Southeast Asian immigrants. And as young folks, well, that was when I was younger, we decided that we wanted to build an organization that would redo the refugee resettlement program, hence the birth of Mekong NYC. So we do community organizing, we do arts and cultural program, we have a women's circle and an intergenerational summer program, arts program, and we also do advocacy and direct services. So pretty much everything that was missing in our resettlement process. And I'll share with you a little bit about the campaign work that we're doing. But it's with the vision. We are a social justice organization. We know that we are in the country in which imperialism exists, and the reason why we're here in the United States and in this place. So with those kinds of analysis is what we bring into the work. And all of our work, whether it's the health justice work, if it's our organizing nail salon owners and workers, our work around organizing young people, is always looking at our deportation work, is really always having a gender justice, queer justice, and people of color justice analysis in the work that we do. And a lot of our work is really rooted in the legacy of Dr. King, particularly, I don't know if folks, this is the 50th year of his anniversary, the speech Beyond Vietnam, where he was assassinated a year later because of that speech. And so for us living in the physical being of this country and also experiencing, imperialism, being here, we have no other choice but to be social justice fighters. So that's the kind of organization we are, and we're a national organization. We're part of the Southeast Asian Freedom Network, where we train other Southeast Asian organizers around the country who do criminal justice work, who do deportation work, who does queer justice work, gender justice work in our community. Internally and externally, we're also an international organization. Folks will recall, in 2001, the United States signed a secret repatriation agreement, which is just basically an MOU that says that they can deport Cambodians who've committed a felony. So, like myself, I came here when I was 7. I have no recollection of Cambodia whatsoever. And because of the 1996 Immigration Reform Act, which expanded the term aggravated felony, which made everything a felony, therefore deportable. So people, we have over 500 brothers and sisters in Cambodia right now who've been deported back to Cambodia, who came as children, even just babies when they arrived in the United States. We have a campaign, a year-long campaign now, right? It's called the Right to Return campaign, and we've been back to Cambodia to train those 500 folks to be organizers, to start addressing the MOU. And when I was there in November was when we found out that Trump was elected. So it was literally, we were in a meeting with the government official to have them, to advocate for them to amend the repatriation agreement so that it protected folks who were refugees like myself who came in the 80s. And they agreed to it. The Cambodian government agreed to the amendment, and we were working on it, and Trump happened. To which we were all shocked, as Americans, we're like, oh my God, should we go back? And then the government was like, the U.S. will always be the U.S. It doesn't matter who's in power. So that was like a huge learning lesson for us as organizers from the United States, going to organize and working with the governments over there. But in recent months, there's been a roundup of Cambodians and Vietnamese. I don't know if you've heard. Over 100 people in Long Beach, California, home to the largest Cambodian population outside of Cambodia, were detained. And we just filed a class action lawsuit last week. So there's a lot of, I won't go into the details of all of it, but a lot of these folks, have been, that served their time, a year, 2 years, 3 years, were released, have been out for over 20 years, 25 years even, and now being detained and being deported. And then it's also happening in the Vietnamese community, and the Vietnamese community is very recent. In the last 6 months, we've been seeing detention and deportation and forced self-removal processes. We were just in Georgia doing intakes and visits right now with folks who've been detained to see if we can actually reverse some of their criminal conviction in order to change, to make the deportation order null, right? So if you don't have a felony, you're not deportable. We're trying to do everything we can, but we're also doing a lot of know your rights training in the community, around immigration, and I want to open up to questions. I know we don't have that much time. We also, I just wanted to share with you, so we are working with an organization in Cambodia called Cambodian Living Arts. I don't know if folks have heard of them, but when they started about 20 years ago, they were picking up all the people, the master singers and musicians that were still alive who weren't killed off because, the Khmer Rouge killed all the musicians, artists, dancers, and whoever was left were pretty much on the streets. And this organization started by rehabilitating, housing the master artists, and begin to have them teach again. So this group is actually doing an international project called A Requiem for Cambodia, and it is it's called Bangsko. It starts, the world premiere was in Australia a few weeks ago, and they're going to do different rituals in different countries. So Australia, then they're coming to New York December 15th and 16th, and then to Paris in May of 2018, and then back to Cambodia. So this is a really healing ritual for us, and I think that's one thing that I wanted to affirm is that, community organizing is a ritual for us. And it's actually part of our healing process, and it's actually, and community building is an act of resistance, and that solidarity for Southeast Asian means that we are in solidarity with folks, particularly folks who are part of the Black Movement for Black Lives. Next year, we are doing something together to talk about what that looks like in terms of organizing and solidarity working the Black and Southeast Asian community at Riverside Church with Dr. King's lawyer, Dr. Pepper, who's still alive. And so we want to really rebuild that consciousness and that work to continue the civil rights movement, but also to acknowledge the healing and transformation and the organizing that we need to do here in the United States. So December 10th, we're having a huge opening ritual. I invite you all to join us. It's going to be, well, we'll send it out to Dr. Anson to disseminate, but, and I just wanted to reaffirm that the folks that are here, it wasn't until last year, I think, that I was like, oh, I'm actually a survivor too. I just thought I was a Bronx girl, Bronx girl. But I realized, we lived in 2 refugee camps before we made it here. And I was raised in the Bronx, so Bronx in many ways, but also culturally Cambodian in many ways as well. And funny enough, when I went to Cambodia for the first time, I was like, I am going to be super Cambodian. But they're like, you're American, you're not Cambodian at all. So it was the funniest thing, but it's still, and my kids were looking forward to bringing them back. But the last thing I'll leave you with is that our work is also looking at intergenerational trauma. So we organize the young folks and the adults to really start storytelling. You know, at our office we do a lot of painting, a lot of memorial work, memory work, active memories as active resistance. One day y'all should come, you know, and visit. But we also have a community garden that we just started too in the neighborhood, and we're building a community center next year. We're also building a clinic as well. So many things happening, but that's because of the work that the folks who came before us, and you know, the legacy that we want to continue, and the organizing and leadership development that we need to do, and conscious raising, and the line drawing that we have to do in our community line. Are you there? Are you here? But really being part of a social justice movement in this country is our goal, and our liberation of other people as well.
Does anybody have any questions, feelings, comments?
What does Mekong stand for? What does the name
That's
word stand
Funny enough, Mekong is actually the rivers that run through Southeast Asia. It's our lifeline. And so we organize both Vietnamese, Cambodian, Hmong, Laotian folks. So we thought that the name was appropriate in a way that, yeah, I mean, I think Reverend Venerable Kandal, who mentioned that people's heart is still in Cambodia, you know, but they're physically here. So for us is to acknowledge that, but also there's strength in a united community. Even though our community back home, you know, geographically don't like each other, we're actually stronger. You know, like we always say in the organizing world, like Southeast Asian are the myth in the minority myth. So that's why it's effective in a way to organize, but it's the river that runs to Southeast Asia.
Any other comments, questions? Dr. O'Connell, do you want to make a comment? Or any feedback of your experiences? You've been here so long with
No,
us.
those are so interesting, and as you said, you were born in either 78 or 79, we're not sure. But, I mean, I always think when I see a patient that was kind of the maximum year of trauma for a population. And as I learned from Joyce, who takes care of the Vietnamese population who survived war, kind of mostly 10 years earlier than that population had some trauma, but not universally. That everyone had a very different war experience, and not everyone was traumatized by that. And the Cambodian population was very almost universal, that everybody had some trauma in the family, and that meant, like many people surviving a genocide or other things, that's not always something people share with their children. They usually want to protect their children from that history. And you were talking about the intergenerational stuff, and I think that's interesting, working with our seniors, working with the generation who are parents now, working with their children, how they're coping with that legacy. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or Joyce, have any thoughts on how it is for families who for many years didn't share stories, but now sometimes do.
You know, one of the things that I completely overlooked it in commenting. The average number of trauma experiences a Cambodian refugee has undergone is 16. And when we say traumas, what does trauma mean? Trauma is defined as being in a hurtful situation. And for a Cambodian refugee, that would start with separation of your family and friends, starvation, slave labor, witnessing of killing of others, killing of your family members, aerial bombings, being tortured. And one of the things when you're working with patients, and our experience is Southeast Asian, but this is, you know, actually Harvard has continued to do scientific studies on the association and the prevalence of the high psychiatric disorders related to having suffered multiple traumas. And so we serve patients that come around the world where there is mass violence. And so sometimes when patients present to you, you might not even think, oh, when you're doing an evaluation, oh, I need to ask about trauma, war trauma. Have you ever been tortured? I mean, I think it's common in our communities, but it's something, again, that we don't talk about. And patients are not going to tell you about it if you don't ask. And definitely, you know, with the issue of intergenerational trauma, that is something that is passed on. And we see it with our families. We have a caseload, Saranai, at the Family Health Center, about 100 patients that we've been following for over 20 years. So we get to see a spectrum of, you know, of life, basically growing up with community members, and seeing how a lot of young people that were parented because of the trauma that the parents witnessed. You know, we have high rates of educational, high dropout.
High dropout rate, domestic violence.
Thank you.
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse, alcoholism, and major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. And even if you've heard of the ACEs study, that's something that Montefiore has been talking about, having conversations about, and making sure that patients are screened to ask them about. Yes, Dr. O'Connell.
And it stands for adverse childhood experiences, if people don't know, and that's more and more in pediatrics. It's
Yes,
like
yes.
screening
But
parents for
at the clinic, for us, it's they're trying to standardize it among adults, because they predict that if your patient, or maybe even yourself, if you answer to the amount of traumas that you've had as a child, you're more likely to suffer from many medical conditions. So there's a direct correlation. So.
Yes. Can you speak to if there's been any tension at times in the past between the community organizing work and the priorities of the institution Montefiore that you are related to, and what you've done in those situations?
There's been many. We've protested, we've done sit-ins with the elders in the community. We continue to hold protests. The last one was 2 years ago. It's been 2 years ago.
2 years when we first moved to the Family Health Center on Fordham Plaza.
Yeah. So there's always, and I think that what we've learned is even though, we think as organizers, we think about our work in terms of campaigns and things like that. And, for us, we thought winning, and this is something that I've learned over the years, that just because they say, yeah, we'll give you translation services, that doesn't mean the program's going to be sustainable. And we've seen the decrease in hours and time, the institutions, as you all know, are about money and what makes money. And I was sitting in a meeting with Montefiore executives 2 years ago, pretty much mediated by Gustavo Rivera, a senator. And the VP was like, well, it's been 30 years. And I wanted to throw water at him, but I didn't, So we walked out of there like there's just a disinvestment, but there's just a lack of a sense of just disregard to humanity and our dignity that we could no longer be at that table and negotiate with them. So we decided that we would start our own clinic. We're in the process of working with Bronx Lebanon Martin Luther King Health Center to do that. So it makes sense in a lot of ways from Mekong, to develop that partnership. And it's a legacy project for us, So even though it's not Monty, we know institutions don't last, but our community will. So there's always that tension, and implementation is actually the hardest part of the campaign, not winning the demands.
What are some of the, both at the clinic and at Mekong, or here, what are some, program spaces or groups or whatever that's out there that's been kind of healing for people who've experienced lots of trauma besides mental health services? Like traditional?
Just in speaking with our work, I work very closely with Mekong. I volunteer for Mekong, of course, and so Chayan can speak about the community work and initiatives that they have. But for us, again, starting we realized that mental health is very important, and that old models of recovery are null, and that you really have to provide a holistic approach to help patients. So part of the work that when we started was the usage of rituals, and that's something that we actually don't do now, but just for years, the usage of Buddhist rituals in the incorporation of the treatment was something that we utilized that helped patients get an understanding of what emotional health was, but just helping them to get to trust us that we acknowledge and we respected their belief systems. And the usage of art, you know, for like over 10 years, we had a project ongoing, Art for Health, where we utilized working collaboratively with visual arts organizations to work on art projects with community members as a way of healing. And I always tell patients, you know, because our patients, they really do have been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and major depression, which can be very debilitating. And our community has a high rate of utilization of SSI benefits, which are Social Security disability. They are impaired psychiatrically. I forgot what I was going to say. Can you help me?
What was I gonna say, Saran?
The value of art.
Oh, thank you for the, you know, the value of artwork as a mechanism for healing. And we always comment to patients, there are many ways of healing. You know, it's not just medication, which sometimes, you know, in our practice, thank you, said that, thank you. In our practice, you know, there's a tendency to push, and believe me, with patients that are suffering from severe major depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, many of our patients do take psychiatric medications, but it's not the only course of treatment. And so that means other ways of healing, which is around art, rituals, around organizing, promoting culture and dignity, self-determination. So it's not just one thing that you use to heal.
Yeah, and I think that part of it too is like, you know, as we learn our parents' secrets, and secrets actually have it's a funny thing, because as liberating as it is for them to tell the secrets of what happened, like my age, for example, there's also secrets that kept them alive. So for them, you know, those are very painful memories that I think that is a lifelong process. And I think that people ask us all the time, what is healing? What is justice for you all? And, you know, the Khmer Rouge tribunal spend millions of dollars, and we're trying to try these two old folks that it's not going anywhere. But that justice is healing for us, right? So I think that investing in those kinds of programs and investing in community-led programs, and you know, for Mekong, we hire from the community, we train from the community, and most folks have not graduated, have not even finished high school. But in our core, and I think Joyce alluded to this, is that we have a women's program, we have a young people program, we have an organizing program that connects, and you know, we are also part of rebuilding the armory that you guys see on Kingsbridge, and negotiated a community benefit agreement that will provide jobs and all these other spaces for our community. But at the core of our work, and at the core of our community, and at the core of Mekong, and I think at the core of at the Indo-Chinese Mental Health Clinic and at the temple, is that three things: that we needed to develop a program that folks feel connected to, that people feel a sense of safety, and that it gives people a sense of dignity. So that's been our guiding formula around addressing those work, whether it's a project, whether it's a program that our young folks create or our elders create, that it also has intergenerational components to it as well. So our leadership looks like this, you know. So yeah, so building, and then having people will be part of other people's resistance and organizing work. So showing up to rally physically showing up to
Not
rallies.
just
Even
ours,
not just our rally, but making sure that our elders show up and our young people show up to a Close Rikers campaign, you know? Why is it connected to Mekong, right? So like having those opportunities to have people see a sense of self-determination and liberation that's contingent on each other.
Actually, we went to the Close Rikers with the group of, what is the, Dr. Robles, the young people that are,
Bronx Community Health Leagues.
yes, they participated with
So
us with Mekong.
marched from FHC, right? Was that
No,
right?
no, we
Picked up from
marched.
FHC.
I'm
They
sorry.
picked up from FHC. The bus got picked up.
Oh, yes, and we headed out to Queens to Rikers with them. Anything else?
Can I just
Yes,
make one
please.
comment?
Yes.
And I'm always admiring very much of Osra and Joyce's bravery over the years of confronting the institution, because there's always the ebb and the flow where there's moments where the institution is very proud of its work with the Cambodian community, and they kind of promote that, and then interest drifts away, and then some other part of the bureaucracy says, oh, you're doing this job, we want you to do it in this rigid way. And that's when you guys have kind of engaged in struggle, as it were, and you know, kind of put your jobs on the line for the sake of the community, and, you know, with some wins and some loses, but sort of carrying on, and with a lot of allies, and that, like I said, it's always very impressive, just the resilience you've had to kind of continue with that. And that was the one just 2 years ago, where, right, they just basically, now that they had this new mental health thing, which is a very good new program, they said, so let's shove this one aside, because our bureaucracy is now interested in implementing this, and it's like, well, we have this other thing. And really, I think that the horror was there was money coming in to support your work, and a bureaucrat who wanted to push his other thing actually called that department and said, stop sending money.
Right, keep your money.
And they really, like, just out of bureaucratic pique, like, really attacked the program, but you guys overcame that with a lot of struggle and a lot of trauma, because, you know, I remember how much you guys were working and struggling through all that. And then with Chaya providing then community support too, and then, as you say, the community protests. So I just want to give an acknowledgement of the great work you've all done. And also, Sarah gave me also the acknowledgement of people of Cambodian patience. I find, especially with some of the older ones, they find that's a greeting. Do people find that's a helpful greeting for other people to give?
Thank you.
So I would just add very briefly that if you think about the stories that we've heard about community organizations, Sapnas began with a community survey. That's what Raj Patel did. And this was really also the way that what would become Mekong started, where they did a house-to-house survey of the Vietnamese and Cambodian communities to find out what their healthcare needs were. And then once they had that information, they were then able to advocate for more services. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind. Also, Mekong benefited from the Committee Against Anti-Age. So there are too many A's in that word. CAB's investment in her and other young people as leaders in the community, a little bit like Juan Robles. And that was important for them, and you can also see that the enterprise that is Sapna also benefited from actually getting a lot of money from different organizations to support what they were doing. So I'm just giving this, so you're sort of thinking a little bit and conscious of what's going on as the history, not just at this particular moment. And I also just want to acknowledge just, you know, some, maybe one or two stories from my own Cambodian patients. I mean, one of the things that's very common in patients, and it's not just in Cambodia, but in other places, is that if you've been beaten or tortured, there is a permanent damage to your body. The x-rays can be fine, everything can be fine, but you feel that damage, and that damage is alive, and there's no medicine in the world that will get rid of it. That's sort of a very profound thing, I think, to understand. I've also had that in women I've taken care of who had abortions many years ago, but they feel that whatever bad thing was done to them in the abortion, it will never, ever go away. So it is really important, I think, to listen. I love this idea of eating the people.
So do we. So do
That's
I.
the big one. We could just stop right there. Working with the people and playing with the people. The
Eating,
community.
working, and playing. Can I ask you, do we still have the Human Rights Clinic on 161st Street that was there for 100 years?
That is, yes, they still do the human rights evaluations at CHCC.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's similar, it's in providing help for asylum work of refugees or of other persons that come from other countries, and in helping them build a case so that they can stay in the U.S. legally.
So
A lot of torture survivors. I mean, I don't collaborate with them, unfortunately, but I know you had you had a relationship with Lonnie that used to do that work.
right, so it's being done now by another attending, Eva Metalios, and they follow.
At CHCC.
At CHCC, right. So those of us who are internists will be going into that clinic at some point in their training.
Really important work, too. Yeah.
So I think we're gonna close it with some meditation. Is that right, Yvonne? Yes.
Yeah.
And more food, the folks want food too. No, we're doing meditation.
Iya, menunjang mana dokter Anderson dokter dokter sematik ramati.
Is there anyone used to meditate? You? Okay. I would like to sit over there so that you can see what I will be doing. As a Cambodian Buddhist people, we sit like this. Gentlemen and ladies, when we come to the temple, we sit like this to chant, to listen to the monks, and to offer something to the monks. I do not force you to do that, I just tell you what we are doing. Okay? And to meditate, we sit differently. We sit like this.
Now like that.
We sit like this and we put our hands like this. Your thumb together like this and put like this. Yes. And your body is straight up. Do not try to do it, just sit naturally, normally, and then you close the eyes, close the ears, close the mouth, close the nose, and close your body. Keep only your mind. Can you hear me? You hear, right? Okay. You bring your mind to the tip of your nose, here, right here. Your feeling is there on the tip of your nose, and you breathe in and breathe out. When you breathe in, you know that you breathe in. When you breathe out, you also know that you breathe out. when you breathe long, you also know it's long. When you breathe out short, you know that you breathe out short. So this is the way to keep your mind calm, to control your mind, right here on the tips of your nose. But do not try to do it. Just keep your mind naturally, normally. And if your mind do not stay on the tip of your nose, just investigate where are your minds and what are they doing. And then bring your mind back to the tips of your nose. Your mind is moving. The mind moves all the time, but the movement is not permanent. It changes all the time. Just stay for a while somewhere. So just investigate your mind and keep your mind on the tip of your nose. If you can keep your mind on the tip of your nose for long, you will be calm and peaceful and happy. The happiness is created by the calmness. So we would like our mind to be calm, to stay somewhere long time, and then we can be happy, we can calm and forget everything. Like the problem we were talking about, a lot of problems. You can meditate half an hour to keep our mind on the tips of our nose. Just see what it is, so we can be calm and peaceful and happy. So I will count 1, 2, 3, and then we start. 5 minutes. Do you understand what I talk?
Yes.
Okay. So just keep our body straight up, close, like what I said, and then put your feeling, put your mind on the tips of your nose and see what is it. Try to be calm, try to investigate your mind and bring your mind wherever you go to your tips of the nose. But do not force your mind to come, Just investigate there and the mind will come back to the tips of your nose. Okay, we count. 1, 2, 3. this town. How did you feel? Do you have any comments? Questions? You feel heard? Okay. Do you have any question? Okay, if you don't have, so everything we done today. And thank you again for coming here. All of you so meaningful for us. Thank you so much on behalf of the board and our people. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. All of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.